Well, good morning. Good morning to everyone. I think many of you already know me, but my name is Lily Cox, and
Kids count data.
Oh, it's on.
on behalf of the St. Croix Foundation's board and staff, and of course, our Kids Count USVI team, I'd just like to warmly welcome and thank you so much for being here today. Jessica talked about the data being really critical, and it truly is. And so seeing all these faces is part of the work. So today we are convening for the official release of the 2022 Kids Count Data Book. And we do have a very full agenda. So if you have any questions, comments, please type them in the chat and we will get to them at the end in a Q&A section, or just hold them and we'll open up the floor. As you can see here, I'm going to move through introductions really quickly. Then Deanna James will provide a few remarks on Kids Count, our work and approach. Then we're going to talk about a systems tool that we've developed over the past year that sort of frames the data book this year and our conversation today. Then we're going to move into the heart of the matter, the data itself. Our principal investigator and our data researcher will talk about the climate that we're working in and the data landscape as a territory that we're navigating. They will provide you with a few key indicators from the data book, some findings, and the actual link to the electronic data book itself. We will then spend just a few minutes framing our strategy, including our focus on a very specific older population of youth. We're going to talk about some cross-sector collaboration and systems thinking, and then we'll wrap things up with a few closing remarks. We do have a short poll at the end, and then we'll have some Q&A. So as we move through the presentation, again, if you've got any comments, just jot them down and hold on to them for the end. Without further ado, I just want to make sure to introduce the Kids Count team that's in the room today. We've got Dr. Saul Santiago. He's our data analyst and principal investigator. He works very, very closely with Ms. Lori Blake, who's our researcher and data designer. Dr. Alethea Fraser-Rayner is here with us as well. She is our outreach and engagement coordinator, conducting some really broad-based and yet targeted outreach into the community. Ms. Charmaine Hobson is our link between all of the sectors, public, private, and civic, as our sector liaison. Of course, we have Ms. Deanna James, our president, myself, and Dr. Ana Belis-Gabriel, who is our special projects and production lead. Dr. Lucy Jackson is usually in our team, and she is currently working with us on some policy research. So that is our team. And without further ado, I will hand the mic on over to you, Deanna.
Thank you, Lily. And good morning. Good morning to the team. Good morning to all of the folks that are taking time out of their schedule to join us today for the official release of the Foundation's 2022 Kids Count USVI Data Book. On behalf of the board and the staff of St. Croix Foundation, as well as our very talented and dedicated Kids Count team, just want to thank you for being here. We hope that by the end of the hour and a half that we'll be together, that you will feel that this was time well spent. I'm going to take a deep breath, and I know my team needs to take a deep breath. I think if people really knew the Herculean lift that our entire Kids Count team does to get here each year, I think you all would be probably more impressed than I am, and I am beyond impressed. I'm deeply humbled. I'm abundantly inspired. But most of all, I'm just grateful to be a part of what I believe is one of the most talented, dedicated, and fundamentally good-natured teams that I've had the privilege to work with. Every single member of this team has poured their heart and their soul into this data book, collecting the data, compiling the data, graphing the data, and preparing it for publication. I would also be remiss to not mention my St. Croix Foundation operational and programmatic team, who allow us the time and the space and the resources to do all this important work. So thank you to you all. I have to say that this book is truly ours. It's not just about us. it's by us, and it's for us. And we hope that everyone will take time to read it, to digest it, and then to commit themselves to, even in some small way, transforming our local landscape in ways that ensure that we are building and sustaining sturdy and layered, equitable, and accessible systems and supports for all of our children. To offer some background information about Kids Count, for almost 2 decades, Kids Count has been an invaluable resource for our community, providing a temperature check on how children and their families here in the Virgin Islands are faring. Kids Count has also been an essential part of local policy development, as well as St. Croix Foundation's own program development. Launched by AECF Foundation in 1990, over the past 30 years, Kids Count has become one of the most comprehensive data repositories for state and city governments across the nation. In February 2020, just minutes before the world went into lockdown, AECF tapped St. Croix Foundation to lead Kids Count for the territory. We remain committed to advancing the great work led by the Community Foundation of the Virgin Islands for approximately 2 decades. Now, kind of getting down to the real business at hand, which is this year's data book. First and foremost, as you look at the cover, and Lily, if you can just go back to the cover, I just want to spend a couple of seconds talking about, we really hope that you are moved by this cover. It grabbed our attention the first time we saw it. It is artwork by a local artist. My colleague, Dr. Fraser Rayner, will spend some time at the end of the presentation talking a little more about the cover. But in the meantime, we hope that you will keep this child on the cover in mind as you synthesize the data in the book. Her solitary figure represents the siloed and dysfunctional aspects of so many parts of our existing systems. But there is also hope in that image. Over the course of the next hour, we'll provide some highlights of some of the most compelling data points in our 2022 data book. Several of the things we hope you will walk away with are, first and foremost, through our spotlight on the territory's opportunity youth. That's youth between the ages of 16 and 24. We hope that moving forward, we can collectively begin to actually support them and to see their potential in the data. We spent a lot of time over the past year talking about systems, inspired by the systems that are working, frustrated by the many that are not, and ultimately convicted by our commitment to use our stewardship of Kids Count to go deeper than just the data. As we seek to serve as a bridge between seemingly disparate stakeholders and service providers, we hope that we, and that's the big we, will begin to think in terms of systems with the recognition that every single data point is inextricably connected to every other data point. Finally, we encourage the community to use the data. We have presented it in a way that will provide the greatest utility for our community partners, recognizing that the vast majority of our stakeholders noted that they use Kids Count for grant writing and funding proposals for policy development. Our hope is that there is sufficient contextual framing throughout the report that can be directly cut from the data book and pasted into funding proposals and other pieces of collateral. We hope that this will be a significant benefit, in particular to our low capacity nonprofits and government data partners. With a targeted goal of reporting current real-time data, we have dedicated countless hours engaging with key government data partners, developing collaborative agreements around data collection and data sharing. Today, we are proud to report that this past summer, in partnership with the Office of the Governor, we executed a 9-agency memorandum of understanding between St. Croix Foundation and governmental departments that touch the lives of children every day. This MOU represents the foundational structure around annual data collection moving forward. Now, before I turn over the mic to my colleagues, my colleague, Dr. Anna Scabriel, will talk about our focus on systems thinking in this year's data book. Dr. Scabriel will be followed by Dr. Santiago, who is our principal investigator. I have to highlight the fact that these 2 colleagues following me are daughters and sons of our soil. In fact, every member of our team brings such impressive credentials and passion to this work. that I hope that you have confidence in what we are presenting to you and look forward to your feedback. Anna, the mic is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deanna. Good morning to all. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. Hey, Jackie. Hey, Ifat. Hey, Kanuma. I'm so excited to share about the image that you see here, which has served as a cornerstone of this year's data book development and also shares the title, From Silos to Systems, Pathways to Child Wellbeing in the USVI. And I have to note that this is one of those examples of something that starts as an idea or a possibility in your mind. What if we did this thing? So for us to see it on the screen is just extremely fulfilling. So I'm going to take a few minutes to talk through the impetus for this image, as well as our hope for its use. Use being the critical word that you will hear me say multiple times. So as we on the St. Croix Foundation's USVI Kids Count team have continued to analyze, work with, and discuss the various data points gathered over the past several years of our stewardship, we became increasingly aware of the need for different levels of perspective in that analysis. So this might be familiar. What I mean is that by being so close to each individual data point, we recognize the need to sort of zoom back out and look at each domain as a whole, then look at all of the data as a whole in a way that would let us see patterns and understand connectivity between and among the data points and between and among the domains. So we asked ourselves, if we were to zoom out and take a bird's eye view of all of the data that we've gathered, what would we actually see? And to answer this question, we decided to draw on the concept of systems thinking. So often we're only focused on parts of the systems, but to better see the child well-being system as a whole, we began the process of mapping this existing ecosystem of a child's life in the form of this systems map. And to do so, we engaged with consultants with an organization called The Outside, who helped us craft the visual tool that you see here. So drawing on the 4 domains of the Kids Count model and infused with our lived experience and professional insights, this serves as a visual representation of that system of child and family well-being in the USVI. Through the release of this year's data book, we're encouraging all of you and the broader community to actually join us in what we're referring to as a collective exercise of systems thinking and systems building by exploring and connecting what you see here as the siloed components of the system map. So let's take a closer look at the visual. You'll see that the 4 domains of well-being, economy, health, education, family, and community, are depicted as primary levels of the system. And the system references the historical significance and colonial implications of the sugar mill. We figured it would be something that's familiar to people. They have a concept, sort of that double entendre of the visual and what it actually means, the purpose of the different components and parts. Within each domain, there's also a foundational question, which you see highlighted in that kind of yellow strip, which prompts us to answer or prompts us to consider the broad impact of each domain on a child's life. So, is our economy supporting our children? Are our children healthy? Are we educating the whole child for success? Are we helping our families and children thrive? These are the kinds of big picture questions that we're wanting everyone to consider, in addition to focusing on those individual data points that you're referencing in your graphs or in other kinds of contexts and areas. Within each of the domain layers, we also then explore the various factors that contribute to or support or detract from or compromise child well-being. So the closed ecosystems, those layers, are contained in silos. However, the possible connections between those domains are also envisioned as ladders. So there are connections, there are possibilities to break down those silos, but they need to be consciously approached. Now, in the broader context, you'll see here that the tool also includes some internal forces. Along the left-hand side, you see the path with the markers. These are the foundational elements upon which many of our systems are built, the values, the cultures, the history of our people. So what are the foundational elements that are leading into this system? You'll also see the impact of external forces, which are depicted as the winds coming in from the east that turn the mill, with the power source represented as the blades, which reflect the critical inputs influencing the system's operation. you'll notice that there's a blank space on one of the blades, that one towards the top right, which again is intentionally prompting users such as yourselves and others to consider what factors might you think also serve as critical inputs to the system. Now, what we're really wanting to get at here is that the key elements of a healthy functioning system free of silos is coordination and collaboration, which I know it's really hard for you to see that on the screen right now, but it's at the center of the blades. And what we're asking you all to do when you get the physical book, we've arranged it in such a way that you can literally take this part of the book out. You can put it on your wall. You can make copies. We want you to, blow it up. You can do whatever you want with it. It's something that is manipulable, and we want you to write on it. It's to be used. In the electronic version of the book, you'll be able to zoom in so that you can see better. You can also print it out. It's really something that we want to be functional. Now, framing the comprehensive visual is this greeting along the left-hand side. It's used by Maasai warriors, Kaserian and Gira, and it means how are the children? So the idea behind this is that these fierce warriors, when they greet each other, they're asking how the children are doing. And it's really this reminder that we are still a village, and we're acknowledging that the well-being of our children is a direct reflection on the well-being of our society. Okay. Of course, the final thing that I'll say is that this tool is a work in progress, and we're inviting the wisdom of our collective community to join us on this journey. We really want you to make this tool your own, to put your spin on it, to give us feedback. We'll have contact information shared at the end of this presentation, and please feel free to email us and tell us, I think this, you have this in the wrong place. What if we did this? All the different possibilities. We really hope that this will challenge our collective thinking about the system that currently exists and the system that we want to build for our children and our families. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Saul to discuss the data climate and key data points from this year's data book.
Good morning, everyone. Here it is. This is the link to the 2022 Kids Count USVI Data Book. We will be placing the link into the chat, and you are the first people outside of our small group to take a look at it. And so we are very, very excited to have you dig in and see the work that we've been working on. So I want to take the next few slides to talk about the process of data collection, call your attention to a few of the hundreds of data points that we feature in the publication. Of course, we thank you for being here as we present this year's data book. We're excited. We want you to explore all of the information we put together from all of our partner agencies. So I think if Jessica could put the link in the chat, make sure everybody has access to it, and I'll walk you through what we our approach to the data collection in the data book. So the next slide, please. So as a Kids Count grantee, we collect and upload information to the National Kids Count Data Center. We have the same indicators requirements as the other states and territories across the nation. In the US Virgin Islands, of course, not every agency had readily available public data or reports. Some agencies had to manually collect data from various paper records to produce reports for us. We don't have what other states have in terms of the American Community Survey. We do have the VI Community Survey, but no survey has been published since 2015. The last Youth Risk Behavior Survey was conducted in 2017 and published in 2018. We featured its findings in last year's data book, as you may recall, and it painted a stark picture of our youth's mental health. And of course, since then, we've experienced traumatic events, including the pandemic. So this points to a critical need for more current data on our youth. So we have a lack of reporting tools, and of course, every agency is its own data silo. In some cases, within the same agency, each island is collecting different data, making comparing information difficult even within the same organization. In other cases, the agencies indicated that they simply did not have available the data that we were requesting. We also knew early on that without a centralized data source, we would need to go directly to the government and work with the governor's office to standardize data collection. And so the St. Croix Foundation, as Deanna mentioned earlier, signed a territory-wide cross-sector memorandum of understanding with 9 key agencies that outlined the types of data that we would collect from each agency. So for this data book, we've collected data directly from agencies. We've also used public data repositories such as the Virgin Islands Virtual Information System, Views, which is by the Department of Labor as well. We've also compiled information from documents that agencies have submitted to the USVI legislature as part of sworn testimony. And where public sector agencies didn't have the data, we look for signals elsewhere. So for example, nonprofits that provide services for children. So leveraging the existing relationships that the St. Croix Foundation has within the community, including the USVI Nonprofit Consortium, we talked to nonprofits, we talked to private schools, and anyone who had data on the children of the USVI. And via our team members, we wanted to create relationships with those agencies. And those non-traditional sources have provided valuable data to fill in some of the gaps that I described earlier. Next slide, please. So you have the book, and as you go through it, I want to outline the kids count domains where we collect the data. We have family and community, we have education, we have health, we have economic well-being. Those are the traditional AECF kids count domains. We've also added opportunity youth and community bright spots, and my colleagues will expand on those a little later on in the presentation. But through collaboration and research, we expanded the breadth of the data that we collected for this year's book. In family and community, for example, you'll find information on public housing in the US Virgin Islands. This year, we added data on the housing choice voucher program recipients. So we expanded our reach beyond the traditional housing communities. There were 1,364 public housing households with children in the US Virgin Islands. And in the data book, we break down the households by gender, whether there was a spouse present. We even provide information on their income. And we break down the children into age groups. 23% of all public housing residents in the US Virgin Islands were between the ages of 6 and 13, for example. The education section is perhaps the best example of how we expanded the breadth of data that we collect. This year's data book has data from infants participating in early Head Start to Head Start enrollment, kindergarten readiness, through public and private school enrollment, even to college freshmen at UVI. We also added enrollment numbers from various programs, including career and technical student programs, data on homeschool students, and data on remote learning. We added information on teacher demographics and teacher certification for public school teachers. And we look forward to working with our partners on collaborating and capacity building to create an even better atmosphere for data collection in the USVI. In health, you'll find not just data from the Department of Health, but for the first time, we have data from the federally qualified healthcare centers. So that's Frederiksted Healthcare in St. Croix and the St. Thomas East End Medical Center Corporation. In economic well-being, you will find demographic census 2020 data that was just released in October of this year, in addition to the data that we always feature on wages and employment. The next slide, please. So in this slide, we highlight 2 data points. It's always very difficult for me to just select a few to present because there's so much data that is compelling and important. But the USVI Census 2020 demographic data was released in October, as I mentioned, and we included as much of the relevant data as possible in this year's data book. The poverty rate in the USVI for children is 33%. And in this chart, you can see the breakout by island. The highest poverty rate is on St. Croix, 36%. The lowest child poverty rate is on St. John at 26.7%. The child poverty rate is even higher when we look at children under 5. 37% of children under 5 in the USVI live in poverty. And the highest poverty rate for children under 5 is St. Croix, again, with 42%. Followed by St. Thomas, 33%, and St. John at 30%. So that's just 5 and under, children 5 and under. The other data point that we're highlighting this morning is retention rate, the percentage of students who have to repeat a grade. As in past school years, the highest retention rate was observed among students in 9th grade, where 24% repeated the grade. These are just 2 of the more than 50 charts in our data book. And we encourage you to explore the data in the context that we've placed around the data, as Deanna mentioned. For example, the teen birth rate, that's teens ages 15 to 19 that gave birth, was 15 out of 1,000. That's the same number as the national average. And that's a big improvement. About 10 years ago, it was 59 out of 1,000. That's one area among many that we highlight as being a positive data point. We have a chart showing homeschool enrollment and how it nearly doubled after the COVID pandemic. We have enrollment data for students registered for virtual learning via the Department of Education. So if you want to know what percentage of UVI freshmen benefited from the free tuition program, it's in the data book, 24%, but you can find it in the data book. If you want to know how many babies were born at low birth weight, we have that as well. If you're looking for English language learner enrollment across both public school districts, it's in the data book. And finally, we have our own ideas about how to use the data we've collected to improve its utility, to activate it. So I will turn the presentation over to my colleague, Ms. Lori Blake, who will talk about one way in which we plan to activate the data. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning all. So yes, this is our own way to activate the data. So we've been using here publicly available data set. And this is we're experimenting in producing new interactive reports and visualizations, such as the two maps that you are seeing on the screen. So here we combine the list of the school with selected nonprofit organization, community center, and other community resources on St. Croix, St. John, and St. Thomas. And we also brought the 2020 census data, because this is a population, this is only a small data point of the census data, to show the overall population by subdivision maps being drawn by the census. So here you've seen, this is a static screenshot, of course, but the functionalities of the live demo will allow to click or mouse over a school, for example, to see enrollment and other basic information. For the nonprofit, what are the services? And for if you mouse over any subdivision, then we can display other demographic data for that geography. And we can also update the data as often as the sources. So what is interesting here, if we look at all those data points on the map, is that taken individually, they only give you some data and not information. But if we combine all those data for information, we can expect to draw some more insightful information. For example, we can take a look at identify the transportation need for the use to an after-school nonprofit that offers homework assistance, vocational training, or other program. So it's an opportunity to display where existing private service providers are operating, their capacity, and the information on their target demographic. Combining that data will allow us to find any gap in services for important group, including our opportunity youth. And now I want to turn it over to my colleague, Charmaine Hobson, who will talk more about our work and the data we collected on opportunity youth in the USVI.
Okay, good morning. And I have a lot to tell you about the opportunity youth. This year's data book is filled with a lot of information related to our opportunity youth. But before I tell you about this population, I want you to have an understanding about what adolescents are doing at this age, this point in time in their lives. And I'm going to quote or paraphrase from an article, The Core Story of Adolescence, by the AECF Foundation Framework Institute, that talks about what adolescents are doing now. And in this article, it said that our adolescents are discovering, learning, and adapting to the world around them. They are discovering who they are and who they will aspire to be. They are learning to make decisions, manage their emotions, build relationship with their peers and the people in their community. And they're starting to be resilient, develop interests, passions, and meaningful relationships and goals that will thrust them into adulthood. Their brains are wrapped and prepared for these type of tasks. But unfortunately, the community that we serve are not. And that's how we get to the definition of opportunity youth. These are children who are engaged, that are not engaged, and are not connected to the experiences and the supports and programs and individuals that they need to help them thrive and succeed in the community. So we have a lot of USVI data. Some of it is stark and some of it is bright. Next slide. Our 4 domains that Saul talked about captures information about our opportunity youth. Again, our 4 domains are our 4 primary domains, that is our family and community, health, education, and economic well-being. And I'm going to talk about 1 or 2 of the data points in these sections. Saul covered some of the housing data, but I want you to understand we captured data from VI Housing Authority that said 51% of our public housing residents are 25 years or younger. In health, in 2020, the number of births of teens is between the ages of 15 to 19 was 44. And he went on to explain more about the 15 to 1,000 and how that has really decreased over the years. And that we also received great information from our federally qualified health centers. For example, the Frederiksted Health Center on St. Croix now has 5 centers open to meet the needs of our young people and the people in our community. And the St. Thomas East End Medical Center has served 74 expectant mothers over in 2021, and 49 mental health related cases for children ages 16 to 24. I'm seeing a question. Between the ages of 16 to 24 and 40 between the ages of 0 to 15. In the area of education, we have great data that states that between 2020 and 2021, grades 7 to 12 had 114 students who left the school system. Left the school system means they're unaccounted for or they're considered in the category dropouts. But guess what? In 2019, 2020, we had 191. So this is an encouraging decrease for us. And although the 9th grade remains the highest grade level with dropouts, in 2020, 2021, it was 29. And in 2019, 2020 school year, it was 51. This year, we also received great data from UVI. And UVI had 251 graduates in 2021 and 2022. In the fall of 2021, there were 189 first-time freshmen from our public, private, and parochial schools. But as our population has decreased, we're down to 87,000 plus. I think Saul has that data with him. So has the enrollment at UVI, because in 2020, there were 271 first-time freshmen, and in 2019, there were 318. In the area of economic well-being, the data showed that 33% of our children in the USVI are living in poverty, like Saul stated. But this is almost twice the national average of 17%. And the last reported data for the USVI was in 2015, and the poverty rate was 29% at that time. Next slide. So, like in the last data book, we have a section that's called Spotlight on Opportunity Youth. And I must tell you, last year, we had a scrawny little section about 3 pages where we talked about the opportunity youth. But this year, we have 6 meaty, rich pages filled with data on the opportunity youth. And I'm going to share some of the stats. The Virgin Islands Police Department reported 120 incidents by the youth ages 16 to 24 in 2021. This is a large increase from the 66 reported in 2020. And the split is almost even in terms of gender. 59 were male, 61 females. As of October 2022, there have been 105 incidents reported. DHS, the Department of Human Services, they serve not incarcerated juveniles, including persons in need of supervision, PINs, and the adjudicated youth. And those are youth who have been determined by the judge they have been found delinquent. Human Services, along with other agencies they collaborate with, their primary focus include performing investigations. They offer recommendations to the court. They provide treatment. They also do pre and post planning for youth remanded to YRC, the Youth Rehabilitation Center. According to DHS, between October 21st and June 2022, 126 young persons received services. DHS offered the following data regarding this population. The average age for first police contact was 16.6 years old for boys and 15 for girls. 41% reported having alcohol and drug use. 87% were from single parent households. 43% were totally new to the juvenile justice system. 13% were repeat offenders. 3% were school dropouts. 14% were diagnosed as needing special education. And 62% committed a violent offense. The Youth Rehabilitation Center, from October 21st to June 2022, YRC provided services to 30 minors, 5 girls, 25 boys. 16 minors were admitted to YRC for the first time. The average age of admission for the boys was 16.8 and 15.5 for the girls. 26 out of the 30 minors reported alcohol abuse, alcohol and drug use. And 26 out of the 30 reported that they were abused or neglected in their home. 33% had siblings involved in the criminal justice system, a third of them. 23% were considered high school dropouts. 40% were diagnosed as needing special education. 47% were repeat offenders. And all of the minors at YRC were from single parent households. And they were all living at home at the time of the arrest. In the data book, there's a chart that talks about the family dynamics of this population. And it says that 6 of them came from domestic violence environment. 15 reside in public housing. 28 reside in very low income homes. And I want to share with you a sad piece of truth that we also have in the data book. And I hope you're not taking notes because all of what I'm saying is in the data book. But in 2021, VI Housing Authority reported that the average household income for St. Thomas St. John public housing residents was $21,014, and on St. Croix, $12,159. Next slide. We have to let that sink in because that's really stark. But we also have some bright spots. We had the Department of Labor who gave us information this year. And the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act is the umbrella for most of their youth programs. And underneath WIOA, they have the Summer Youth Work Experience Program. And this is a program, it's a paid internship for ages 16 to 24. It was shut down in 2020, but in 2021, they had 683 young people who participated. And in 2019, 605, and we hope that this continues to grow. And the summer, although it says summer, it's a year-round program. Then they have the Labor Investing for Tomorrow program, LIFT. And that's a program geared towards meeting the needs of juniors and seniors in college. In 2020, they had 20 participants, and it doubled, more than doubled actually, in 2021 with 44. WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, like I said, is a very comprehensive program for youth employment. And they try to capture and work with those youths who are facing challenges with education, training, and employment. And their age range is 14 to 24. And many of them are out of school youth. In 2021, they served 110. In 2020, 66. And we could attribute that to COVID. And 2019, 95. So we hope that that also grows. In 2021, about 60% of those children in the program with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act were males. And that's really pretty stunning for us. Next slide. So I love this mural. This is powerful and it is hopeful. That's why the word hope is there. Because with all this data, we should be filled with hope. And this mural had 3 simple words. Don't give up. And I think this young man is speaking primarily to us. Because as I'll continue with the core story for adolescents, it says that adults working to support young people must transform these dysfunctional and discriminatory programs and systems to meet the needs of all of our children. So, as our data book continues to shine the light on the opportunity youth, and the government agencies and nonprofit agencies work hand in hand to create more dynamic programs for our youth, there is hope. There's true hope that we will move out of our silos and accept the challenge to collaborate across the systems and to ensure that more of our children have meaningful, purposeful, joyful, and hopeful lives. And Alicia will continue because we had the section on opportunity youth, but it drizzled over into the community bright spots where we talked about the government and the nonprofit agencies that are working on preventing a lot of our issues with our opportunity youth. Like I said, there's a saying by our old people, prevention is better than cure. And although we really appreciate what DHS is doing with PINS and YRC, wouldn't it be awesome if we didn't deal so much with the intervention, but we dealt with the prevention and worked on what we needed to do to prevent our children from getting into the criminal justice system. So Alicia, it's your show. Thank you so much, and let's remain hopeful.
Thank you, Charmaine. Thank you so much, Lily. And good morning still. And I'm so happy to see all of these faces, many of which I know, and for those I don't know, thank you so much for being a part of this presentation. So I get to talk about community bright spots, and I can't think of a brighter spot than that image that you see on this page. And if you just look at that image of this young boy, what a bright spot. And it's one of the reasons why we do this work around community bright spots is because we understand that there are a lot of challenges in the data that we see, areas where we have to put more focus and emphasis, and particular populations of youth that really need our fully focused support. But we also want to lift up the kinds of activity that's happening already where we see hope and bright spots. And so the government agencies that are outlined in the 4 domains of Kids Count, as well as our nonprofit organizations, we have a little bit to share with you. And we see that as we continue to do this work, that there is more and more reason to have hope and ways in which we can lift up bright spots. So we know that our community-based agencies are oftentimes the front line in providing the kinds of supports and services for young people. The St. Croix Foundation was the agency that began, the foundation that began the nonprofit consortium in St. Croix. And through that work over the last 3 or 4 years, we're well aware of the critical role that they play. They're often the lifeline, if you will. If we think back to Irma Maria, as well as to the COVID-19 pandemic, the nonprofit organizations across all 3 islands were their safety nets, were the front line oftentimes in providing support to families and to the communities that they serve. And I would also say that they were the ones that were able to be nimble in many ways, in which oftentimes large government bureaucracies or agencies may not be able to be as nimble. And they continue to serve, often with the restrictions that they had to place on themselves and to keep the children safe and keep the staff safe. But they continue to operate. So we decided that because we really believe that data is information, it can be collected in a multitude of ways, not just quantitative data in numbers, but also qualitative data that's reflective of the stories and the lived realities that are happening in our communities with our community members and that nonprofits are intimately aware of. And so we began interviewing nonprofit organizations, and to date, we've interviewed about 30, a little more than 30 nonprofits across all 3 islands. And so if we talk about COVID impacts, that's another way, to be honest with you, in which the impact of and the restrictions of COVID and the wider use of things like Zoom gave us an opportunity to both interview, talk with nonprofits, and also to convene them across the 3 islands. And what we found in talking to them is that many of them had not had opportunities to talk with other nonprofits, and they may do similar work, but on a different island. And so we started to do some skill building activities, and what Charmaine referred to from the Frameworks Institute was around storytelling and how to frame stories in ways that use the data that they have. And they do have data as well to tell the story about what's happening and to advocate for the kinds of supports and services and changes that they know are necessary and needed to do their work. So that's part of what we have been engaged in. And I think one of the things that we can say that's sort of an overall bright spot, if you will, is the fact that both the nonprofit organizations and the government agencies are making connections and bridging gaps and using data more often. So next slide. Oh, actually, I'm going to go. Can you go back a minute? Thank you. Okay. So one of the things that we also found is that we could tell their story as well in the data book. And we began doing that last year and including data, not just from the government agencies, which my colleagues talked about, but including them in a section called Community Bright Spots and lifting up, obviously, just a few of the many nonprofits across the 3 islands, but lifting some of them up so that you can see what kind of work they're doing. You can see the kind of data that they actually collect, and we can track some of their progress over time. So last year, and then we included this year, again, we have the My Brother's Workshop, or MBW, as they're referring to themselves this year, We have the Caribbean Center for Boys and Girls of the Virgin Islands, CCBGVI. We had the Family Resource Center, which operates on St. Thomas. And we also included this year sort of their counterpart on St. Croix, which is the Women's Coalition of St. Croix. And if you look in the data book, you'll see data that they provided about their work, and you'll see a description about their work. And I will note too that if you track some of their data over time, for example, MBW, you will see that there are shifts, important shifts, for example, in the number of young people that they serve, and particularly the gender of those young people that they serve. So typically they serve more boys or young men than girls or young women, and that has shifted over time. And more young women are beginning to get involved in the opportunities that they provide and services that they provide. So we invite you to look at those bright spots in the community, but to also use that as a way to think about what are the kinds of things we can do to better support our community-based organizations, nonprofit organizations, and how can we begin to make connections? Because that's what we need to do, as we illustrated through our image with the systems tool, that it's one thing to have information, have data, or have opportunities, but it's really important that we begin to make the connections so that we can really bridge the gaps that we see through data, whether it's qualitative data or quantitative data. So one of the things that I want to just share with you that that piece of making connections is really important is for us to understand and address whether or not we are operating in silos. As my colleague, Dr. Scabriel mentioned, are we operating in silos? Do we have these ways in which one system is over here and one is over here, or one sector is working over here and another is working over there? And how do we bridge that? What do we do to support, especially nonprofits, so that they can expand and offer the kinds of educational, cultural arts, recreational, and other opportunities and supports to young people? And most importantly, what we realized through the kind of mapping that my colleague, Ms. Lori Blake did, and that is that when you look at this on a map and you began to visually step back and look at, well, where are the opportunities? Where are the community-based centers? What are the kinds of opportunities that they offer? And then where are the young people? And in particular, as Charmaine said, our opportunity youth, where are they located? And then are they located in position to take advantage of those? So having opportunities is great, but having access to those opportunities is really, really important. And the more we can have those conversations across sectors and bridge those gaps, then the more we'll be able to make progress in areas where our young people are not having success. The organization Social Innovation Generation gives a very simple descriptor for systems change. And they define that as shifting the conditions that are holding a problem in place. So if we think, for example, about young people being here in one part of the territory or on one part of the island, and then the opportunity being on the other. Through our interviews, we were able to, as I said, unearth these tremendous supports and services that were waiting to receive these young people, but they can't get there. And the nonprofit organization doesn't have the transportation, which we know, right? Vans and things like that, and insurance are extremely expensive ticket items for a nonprofit organization to include in the budget. So how do we connect them? How do we shift the conditions that are holding that problem in place so the young people that need it can get to it? And the more we collaborate, and I have to say the more conversations that I've been hearing across the territory, even in the last year, the more hopeful I am about us beginning to make those connections and bridge those supports. Next slide, Lily. In closing, I'll just say that one of the things we've also done is began to look at how we can provide skill building for our nonprofit organizations. And the quote she used, the core story of adolescents, came from the Frameworks Institute. And we hope that the work that we did, and we had probably about 25 nonprofits join us in a two-part session with the Frameworks Institute, which is a nationally renowned organization around story framing and advocating, right? And trying to pull together all of the pieces that make it possible for us to tell our story and make the case for support. And this year, we're going to work on advocacy with our nonprofits, because we know that collecting the data and having the data is great, but as Dr. Santiago said, we have to activate that data. And one of the ways we do that is through advocacy work. And so we're going to be in the early spring of 2023, be providing another two-part series. I see many of the nonprofits on this call at your image that were part of the one we did with Frameworks. And we're going to do another one on advocacy, a two-part session. And we invite you and others that are interested that weren't there to be a part of that. So in closing, I'll just say that if you look at our initial snapshot that we produced in 2020, and the image there was the Ujima journey, okay? And as we talked about last year, the adults are there and they're providing steady level pathways for our children to see the future and to get there, which is the first step. Next slide. And then last year, we articulated a vision for what we see as an aspirational vision for our youth, that they are both safe and protected, and that their lives can be child's play. Next slide. And this year, our journey continues, and so does our way of thinking. And in this image, which is entitled Riveted by Virgin Islands artist Nyaris Walker, is both riveting itself and compelling and provocative in the way that it causes us to sit with it for a minute. And as you'll notice, we've pivoted from the younger children in the first image, and then the children in the second image to an older youth. And as our journey continues, so must our ability to really think in systems so that we can better serve this particular population as well. So I will leave there. I'll leave it there and ask that you join us in this journey and that you provide the kind of ideas, which we know you have because we're in contact with you and we hear them often, and share the work and share the book and the data to make changes that will improve the lives of all children. Lily?
Thank you, Alethea. So that about wraps up our presentation on the book itself. I did want to open up a little bit of space for Jessica to post our data poll. And we've got the link there. The electronic versions of the 2022 data book are available electronically by following that link. If you would like a hard copy, as soon as the printed copies arrive, we will make sure that you get them. So please feel free to reach out to us. You can always call the Foundation's office at 773-9898 about any questions you may have about getting books, etc. And while we're taking the poll, I don't know, I thought maybe Jessica might take the reins of this and provide a little bit of a tutorial, just even a minute, about how to use the electronic version. I don't know if that's still on the table.
Yes, so I will go ahead and launch the poll now. Just a quick note about the poll. There are 5 questions. It should only take a couple of minutes to complete, but being a group that loves data, we would really appreciate your taking this poll and letting us know who you are and what your thoughts are about how you might be utilizing this data moving forward. You will have to kind of scroll through the questions. Again, there are 5 of them. And then at the very end, make sure to press submit so that we can collect your responses. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll now. And you should all see the poll come up on your screen. If anybody doesn't see the poll, if they would kind of let us know in chat that they're having an issue. There's a little tab on the right side that you can use to scroll down so that you can see all 5 questions.
And Jessica, would it be helpful for me to stop sharing if you want to just give folks a quick overview of
That would be great. And then, yeah, if you stop sharing, Lily, and then I will share my screen while folks are taking the poll, just to show you all the what the Kids Count Data Book looks like in the platform. So I think people are seeing perhaps my poll. So I'm going to move that out of the way, giving a little preview of the answers there. So in the middle of my screen, you should be able to see the actual data book. This is what it will look like in the platform if you use the bit.ly link to view the data book. And you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a little arrow, and you use that arrow to scroll through the data book. So that will be, it almost looks like a little digital magazine, but it is 60 pages long. It is very data rich. There's lots of visuals, lots of graphs. And you can also use this link to download a PDF version of the data book. So if you want to save this file to your own computer, you would like to print it off yourself, you'd like to reference it later, this link, the bit.ly/2022 Kids Count USVI, that will take you to this screen and you can use that book. So I'm going to, oh, go ahead, Lily.
I was just going to add, one of the nice things about this is there is a search function, and you actually can zoom in and move around. So just, feel free to play with the controls. I think they show up in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can't hurt it. If you end up in a scene where sometimes for me, when I'm looking at it, I might zoom in or zoom out and it freezes. But if you can't seem to figure out how to get out of where you're at, you can always just close your browser and reopen it, and it will open up to the front page or to where you left off.
Here is that those features that Lily was referencing. So the print, the download, the search feature. If you want to share this, we hope you will share it with others. A lot of work went into it, so please spread the word. I am seeing that we're getting the majority of our responses. I'll maybe leave the poll open for another maybe minute, and then we'll close the poll. I'm going to stop sharing on my end, Lily, and then if you, or I think Deanna had some final thoughts while folks are wrapping up their polls.
Yes, that sounds wonderful. Deanna?
Yeah, I want to also just invite folks, if you have questions, to please drop them in the chat. And I want to just kind of take a minute to close things out. I know there's a lot of data in the data book. There was a lot shared here today. I'm sitting here, I tell my team I try to sit here as a guest, looking at this and trying to be objective about what we're presenting, and I'm deeply impressed, despite the fact that I was in it with the team for the last year. I want to just make it really crystal clear that some of the more striking data presented in the data book are in no way an indictment of any agency or any one stakeholder. In fact, the foundation fundamentally believes that every single area of concern that is highlighted in this report belongs to every single able-bodied resident in our community, in the same way that the solutions belong to all of us. I'll close it out, I think, in the same way that I closed out last year's presentation, by saying that we've got a lot of work to do in this territory to ensure that our children are healthy and whole. And the stakes are really high. We have to get this right. We really can't afford to not support our children in the ways that the data is demanding that we support them. And so I want to thank all the folks that took time out, including our partners at NECAC, because they have a lot of releases that they have to attend over the course of a year, for all the states and territory, Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, who are part of the Kids Count Network. So it's really a privilege to have them here on the call with us. But I also just want to let everyone know that this is just the beginning. The release of the data is where it's kind of like the first step in the process. Everything that has to happen afterward, in terms of the conversations we need to have with our data partners, the debriefing that needs to happen, the policy development that hopefully will be yielded from the data that's presented, all of that work begins now. And so I just want to say once again, thank you to all the people who took time out of their schedule to join us today. And most importantly, to thank my team. I hope they'll have a good night's rest tonight for the first time in probably several months. And look forward to really working collectively to move the needle on the welfare of our children here in the Virgin Islands. Thank you, Lily. Jessica, I'll turn the mic over to you all.
Well, I wasn't sure I would have a minute, so I put it in the chat, but I do have a minute, so I'm going to say it verbally that it's so important to us that the entire book represents our community. And so we've reached out to the nonprofits across the territory to provide us with photos with permissions. And I just want to thank CMC Arts, Caribbean Center for Boys and Girls at the VI, Chant, the Children's Museum of St. Croix. Their names are like poetry to me. Fire is Lit, Friends of the VI National Park, Music in Motion School of Higher Dance, St. Croix Environmental Association, St. Croix Montessori, World Ocean School. These are just a handful of organizations that we're working with. And I really want to thank you for your generosity in sharing your photos with us. I did see a couple of quick questions, I think, in the chat. I think most of them got answered, but I did see a new one pop up from Sam. I don't know, Saul, if you can take this question in the section that spoke to primary contact with law enforcement. Was data collected regarding the reason for type of result thereof?
Yeah, so we did touch base with VIPD regarding the arrest. In last year's data book, we actually were able to feature adjudicated youth, and we were able to feature the type of offense and things like that. This year, the data that we received, we did not receive the full data set, and so we were not able to publish the full data set on the types of offenses as we did last year. And so that is one area where, as we've been saying, we need to work to improve data collection around the VI, but we did request that data in terms of the contact with the law enforcement. And, if we do have that data for next year's data book, we'll definitely, we can do a two-year chart. So we can do that. I know there was another question regarding about the, sorry, I'm just scrolling up real quick, about the community centers. So for our initial This was in the dashboard where we featured the map. The community centers, the initial listing came from Department of Sports, Park and Recreation, but this is an example, a great example of where we want to work with community partners to help us identify the resources. We did have more community centers on the list, but we need to be able to pinpoint exactly where they are so we can place them on the map. So that's latitude and longitude. And so this is one area where, we can really use everyone's involvement in making sure that we do identify the different resources and are able to pinpoint where they are, because as several people have commented, it's so helpful to have a visual on that and to be able to see where the resources and services are. So I think those are the two that I saw.
Saul, did you see Sam's follow-up question as well regarding youth surveys posing the same question, like maybe alternative sources?
Well, so the in terms of the contact with the law enforcement, like I said, once they were adjudicated or either DHS or VIPD, we do have data on them. In terms of survey with the youth, there was no youth survey available for us to gather that information. Perhaps that's something that might be something that we can look for in the future. But currently, in terms of the available data for the data book, there were no youth surveys in terms of their contacts. We were interested in that. In fact, in the data book, we talk about how the contributing factors and I know Charmaine did a great job of talking about how we view the preventative, and so having the youth input in terms of what they need, I think would be very, very, very helpful, especially for the opportunity youth. That's an area that we put a lot of focus on and effort on.
I also did see one last question, and I know we're at time, so I want to be very sensitive to that, but I also want to make sure we touch bases on some of the questions. I did see a question, I believe it was from Dr. Kanuma Simmons, regarding how we defined community centers.
Yeah, that's the one I answered earlier.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
And Lily, I really wanted to end by thanking again, since I'm sector liaison, I really want to thank the government agencies and the nonprofit agencies that provided us with data throughout the year and over the last 3 years. It is a work in progress, and it's always stated with VIPD. Sometimes we have to recognize that our priority is not the priority of others, and they continue to work with us. But as we're realizing, some people are working and creating great data dashboards that were systems, and some are at the beginning stages. Some have more robust systems, and we'll continue to work with them. I know starting next school year, we're begging Saul to give a presentation to many of our nonprofit and government agency on better ways to collect and utilize their data. So thank you to the government agencies and the nonprofits, because we're going to be seeing you shortly for the 2023 data book.
I saw Emanuela, Ms. Prescott say, call us at VI Housing Authority. We will. And I want to, they were one of the first agencies to provide data, and they provided additional data to us. So thank them, VI Department of Education, Labor. I mean, we talked to every single, I think, government agency and so many nonprofits. And so we're thankful. We want to keep working with them and in the best way that we can to gather the data that we didn't get to this year. We're still going to keep trying. And once we do have it, we will publish it.
That may wrap us up unless there are any final questions.
Do we have the results for the polls? Did we?
Oh, yeah.
I can share that. Yes, let me pull it up. Okay, so folks should be able to see the results of the poll on their screen. So we had a plurality of attendees today. We're representing a government agency. followed by a nonprofit organization, media outlet, concerned citizen, and other. It looks like folks who currently use the data book, the majority of those folks are using it for program development, although there's also pretty strong use for grant writing, for policy drafting and research, and for advocacy. In terms of the priority areas, it looks like family and community is the most popular area in terms of really being interested in utilizing that data. But there's also strong interest in education and opportunity youth, and health and economic well-being. So frankly, all of the sections are of interest to attendees. In terms of the age that folks are primarily interested in, it looks like that opportunity youth 14 to 18 was 79%, followed by 5 to 13, and then 18 and older adults, as well as 0 to 5 at 50%. And then in terms of the strategies that folks believe are most needed for the USVI to collaborate and operate more effectively as a seamless system of supports for our youth, the strongest strategy would be holding cross-sector convenings of public and nonprofit partners. So that is a real area of opportunity for those of us on this call to look forward to in the coming year. So with that being said, Deanna, I'll turn it back over to you if you have any final thoughts, or if we want to wrap up and just thank everyone for their time. There have been several questions about the recording. This has been recorded, so we will share that recording with the public through our website and Facebook pages. And thank you everyone for your time this morning, now afternoon, and we hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you,
Jessica, thank you. Lily, thank you. I just want to say thank you to my team, and thank you for everyone who joined us here today. Lily, I don't know if you have anything else, any closing thoughts?
Nope. Just stay in touch. You can get a hold of me, lcox@sdxfoundation.org, or call us at 773-9898. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.